Tony D and Little Joan, and this is a screenwriter's rant on Marvel Studios' teaser trailer that's 3.5 minutes. It's Thunderbolts. All right, let's break this down. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Check out my books, links in the description. Comedy Heart in South Jersey. It's the Pineys, book 1 through 15, available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. Excuse me. Why? That's my first question in this trailer. Why? Why did you make this movie? I'll explain it again. So Thunderbolts was a comic book in Marvel Comics. A pretty good comic, by the way. And the premise was this. See, Marvel Comics had for years been pretty staid. You know, it had a bunch of characters. They would rotate them in and out. Good guys, bad guys. And there weren't a lot of new characters on the scene. And it was the usual pattern. Well, Kurt Busiek, I believe he was the one who created it, comes along and he comes up with a great idea. May 2025, by the way. He says, why don't we do this? Let's announce a new superhero team, as Marvel Comics occasionally did, and pretend like they're completely new characters. Because they knew exactly what would happen. Most people said, I'll buy the first issue. It looks pretty generic. And then, a few issues in, people would bail. But then, they're going to have a big revelation. And that big revelation took people by surprise. Because for once, people in the comic book world kept their mouths shut and actually delivered a surprise. The surprise was this. The Thunderbolts was actually made up of a group of supervillains who pretended to be superheroes. So that's a good premise, right? So after, I forget how many issues. I want to say like 5 or 6, somewhere in that neighborhood. They reveal that, in fact, the Thunderbolts, who are now wildly popular in the Marvel universe, not necessarily on the comic book shelf, are in fact all supervillains. The entire superhero team has been a ruse to lower the guard of the superheroes so they could do some more nefarious things. Brilliant. For comic books, it was brilliant. For superhero comic books, absolutely brilliant. It's something we needed for a long time. It was a breath of fresh air. I forget how it ended. I don't remember. But good on, was it Kurt Busiek? I'm almost sure it was him. Let me check on the IMDb. So that was, I'm almost sure it was him. That was, Kurt Busiek. That was the surprise, and that was the story. But you could only do that story under the conditions that Marvel Comics was in at that time. And that condition was that they had a whole crop of characters, good and bad, and they would just rotate them in and out. That is not true with the MCU. With the MCU, actors age out. Some actors die. Some actors just don't want to do the deal again. So the Hollywood people raised the stakes. They killed off Iron Man. They effectively retired Captain America. Gave him an ending. They killed off some of the villains. And not all the villains in the comic book were presented the same way as it was in the MCU. So, for instance, Baron Zemo was one of the main characters in the Thunderbolts, I believe. I believe Zemo was one of them. Zemo has never been popular in the movies. He was introduced, and you might go, well, he was? Yeah, he was in Civil War. He was one of the bad guys in Civil War. But he sort of comes and goes. it wasn't any big deal. And there are a few characters like that in the MCU. They're no big deal in the MCU. In the comics, they had their heyday and sort of faded into the background, and because of that, the movies kind of can't resurrect them. And conversely, some characters in the MCU have elevated characters that were small, that weren't particularly gigantic. So Black Widow plays a much bigger role, an outsized role in the MCU than the character ever did in Marvel Comics. All right, you with me? You with me? Okay. So, once again, the geniuses over at Disney, and this is true in all studios, I think, they get out their giant book of IPs, flop. They flip through it, and they see all these things they own. Oh, we own these comic book characters. We own this team, and those characters, and these bad guys. Well, let's make a movie. So they come across Thunderbolts, and they say, oh, yeah, we'll make this movie. You can't make this movie. Not like it was in the comic, anyway. Now, they continued Thunderbolts for some insane reason. Doesn't make any sense, but they continued the book. And now they're going to try to make it into a movie. So, from the perspective of the comic book aficionado, this movie kind of can't work. Now, you have the MCU. Who's on the team? Well, Black Widow is for some reason. Again, not really a team member in Thunderbolts. And Natasha is dead. In the comics, she's still very much alive. So we have second string Black Widow. They introduced David Harbour's character. I think he is a comic character. I forget. I kind of can't stand David Harbour, but he's there for the comic relief. And they do a hilarious Marvel thing where his daughter shows up unexpectedly, and he's a big slob, and he has to clean himself up before he answers the door. And then she asks him, "Are you really fulfilled, Father?" Now, the rest of the team, you've got a second string Captain America. I think it might be U.S. Agent. I don't remember. So you got him. A couple other B-rated superheroes. Bucky is thrown into the mix because Sebastian, mainly because of Sebastian Stan. His career is, I don't know if I'd say it was taken off, but he's still a big enough name. So is Arbor. So that's what happens in Hollywood. The characters get distorted because, they can't switch Sebastian Stan to another character. He can't be Baron Zemo now. Wouldn't make any sense. Be like Iron Man being played by Doctor Doom. Or vice versa. So you've got these whacked out characters. Oh yeah, and the Taskmaster is in it. The female Taskmaster, of course. Bob. I don't know who Bob is. They're trying to be funny. And comes off as very not funny. Oh, and Julia Louise-Dreyfuss, for some reason, is in it. Not sure why. I think she's the woman that brings them all together. See, here they are. That's the Thunderbolts. And I don't know who this is. Anybody know who that is? No idea. Is it Silver Sable? So there's Julia Louise-Dreyfuss. I have no idea who she is. So I guess I could look on the IMDb. Let's see. Oh, thanks. You're going to give me their actual names instead of their superhero names. That's so helpful. Where is Julia Louise-Dreyfuss? She's not even listed. Oh, dear God. Okay, whatever. Whatever. Anyhow, what's the plot of this movie? Well, the tagline is, "Be careful who you assemble." So in other words, this is going to be the wacky, not so cool version of the Avengers. The problem with that is in the comics, that would have worked. That would have worked really well. Because in the comics, the Avengers are still rocking it. Whether Captain America's in the group or not, the Avengers are still running around. The Avengers are kind of out of commission in the MCU. You have to sustain, in the world of comics, all these balls in the air. Now, they could have written this a different way. They could have given the Avengers a kind of send-off, kept them all alive, and just said, well, they're in New York doing what they do, and occasionally you'd see some footage of Iron Man flying around. But meanwhile, these guys are operating. But they are not doing that. So instead, we've got some second-rate Avengers who essentially are the only team that you're going to see in the movie long after the glory days of the MCU are over. Does this tie into Captain America 4, which also doesn't look very good? I don't know. I assume so. On top of the fact Julia Louise-Dreyfuss has a severe case of TDS, these celebrities don't understand what they're doing to their careers. I can't look at a celebrity like Julia Louise-Dreyfuss and immediately separate her from her politics. First off, she looks almost exactly the same as she looks in real life. And as much as I enjoyed Seinfeld and Elaine, I do not enjoy her politics. And so seeing her is a constant reminder of her politics. And that undermines whatever comedy lines or one-liners they're going to have in this, if there's any political stuff, which invariably there will be. Because, let's be honest, these people kind of can't help themselves. And Disney isn't taking their foot off the gas. So, what's the point of putting in Kamala Harris supporter Julia Louise-Dreyfuss in a movie that's supposed to be about saving America and the world? You're kind of putting us in, the fans, in an awkward position that I have to ignore all her politics. And she's not just supporting Kamala Harris, she is in our face about it. So it undermines her whole deal. Unless she had completely changed her look. Now, she tried to change it a little. She's also the Veep. Kind of undermines her, too. Julia Louise-Dreyfuss really should have stuck with comedy. I'd say. Should have stuck with comedy. She's actually very funny when she wants to be. But now she's trying to move into serious work, and now she's doing this. So another strike against her. So you've got a big name superhero movie helmed by a bunch of people or a bunch of characters that the comic fans aren't all that interested in. So you're relying upon the MCU movies to carry us through. Okay, so you got Bucky. Bucky's solid, I would say. Some people want to see Bucky. Except that Bucky kind of lost some of his cred doing Winter Soldier, which also got very preachy. So I don't know about doing that. You got the characters from Black Widow movie, but that movie bombed. So you've basically got no one to carry people over in this multi-million-dollar movie. I would have never greenlit this. I would have said, no, this can't work. Pick a different IP. And there are other IPs. Avengers West Coast comes to mind. And you might say, well, that wasn't a very popular comic. Again, they don't give a F about the comics. They're doing Agatha all along. Agatha Harkness, who barely had a comic and barely was in the MCU, she has her own freaking show. So it would have been perfectly fine to do West Coast Avengers. You could have done completely different Avengers, which they did in the comic. And you could have put in all these new characters, including War Machine, which is a character people remember and sort of kind of like. So I would have went with Avengers West Coast, because then you could just say, well, there's an Avengers on the East Coast, but now it's a West Coast deal. And then you could have had another Avengers run. Maybe. This, I don't know what you're trying to do. So what's the plot? First act, Black Widow is sad, so she threw herself into her work, murdering people and robbing places. I don't know what her job is now. Are the Black Widows still together? Is she still doing wet work for them? Seems stupid. Her father is a big fat idiot who waits for DoorDash. And, oh, I'm bored, Dad. Oh, okay. And then she gets a job, kills a bunch of dudes, and gets trapped in this room with some other dudes with superpowers. And then they all realize, oh, we're trapped. Probably because Louise-Dreyfuss here trapped them all so she could get them all to come upstairs so she can make them an offer, which seems so comic booky and stupid. I want to punch the screen. And she makes him an offer to become the Thunderbolts, to, I don't know, fight some bad guy. Or is it Julia Louise-Dreyfuss? Is she the bad guy? Who knows? They form a team. They fight the bad guys. At first they suck and they're going to break up. And then they pull it back together and beat the bad guy. The end. Let's read the synopsis. A group of supervillains are recruited to go on missions for the government. Okay. Now that is closer to what the Thunderbolts were. Except Bucky is not a supervillain. He sort of was, but he's not. Black Widow, kind of not a supervillain. I mean, they're all in a gray area, clearly. I don't know who this is. USA agent or whoever he's supposed to be. Second-rate Captain America. Not really a bad guy, but okay. So they're all supervillains. They're trying to do their own version of Suicide Squad. How'd that work out the first time they did Suicide Squad in the DC? Oh, yeah. So let me get this straight. Marvel's now following DC? Okay. What did DC do 5 years ago? Oh, right. In Suicide Squad. That's your funeral, Disney. I guess. Who wrote this thing? Director Jake Shire. Writers are Kurt Busiek, Joanna Callow, Lee Soon-jin. Stars Florence Pugh. Who? Sebastian Stan, Louis Pullman. Would I see this? No. Why would you even ask? There's no reason to see this movie. I already know how it ends. I don't care about a single one of these characters. I want to see the MCU go away, probably for a good 20 years before they bring it back. Or I'd like to see a hard reset, or I'd like to see it go back to the heyday. But that would require bringing back Robert Downey Jr. and Iron Man, and actually looking at the comics and say, oh, right, the same characters are always popular, and we have to keep bringing them back and having them win the day. You can't make this movie. You would have needed to put a real supervillain in this. Who could have you could have? I mean, Taskmaster technically is a real quote-unquote supervillain. So I guess Taskmaster's in it? Is that the girl with the dark hair? I don't think so. I think that's another villain. Who's left? Baron Zemo's alive. I guess you could have used him. But nobody knows who he is in the movies. Thanos, you can't use him. He's too powerful. He wouldn't be in Thunderbolts anyway. I don't know who you got left here. Is there somebody from... you could maybe do someone from Hydra. You could maybe bring back the Red Skull. You would need to get... what's his name? Hugo Weaving. I don't know if he'd do it. But maybe. I would like to see the Red Skull come back. Who else? Who else could you get? I mean, you could try to rebuild the team that was in the actual comic. For what that would be worth. Again, it's not the same as the movies. I would have just said no to this. I would have went with Avengers West Coast. You could have put in War Machine, Tigra, the Black Knight, maybe the Paladin. Could have maybe had USA Agent, maybe have Florence Pugh, maybe have Bucky. I could have done without David Harbour, reminding us of the Black Widow movie. Yeah, doesn't seem like a good idea. This whole thing seems like a bad idea. And that's it for me, Tony D and Little Joan. Check us out on the green site, the orange site, and the black site for more videos. I'm back on the black site. I had to accumulate some magical internet points in order to post there again. I will be on Wednesday at the Hamilton Library for Atlantic County. That's at 7. Is that the Historical Society? Might be the Historical Society. Yes, it's the Hamilton Historical Society of Atlantic County, Hamilton, New Jersey, 7 p.m. How to Hunt the Jersey Devil. And Thursday at the Mary M. Campbell Marcus Hook Primary Public Library in Marcus Hook, PA at 5 p.m. How to Hunt the Jersey Devil. Hope to see you there. We'll see you in the next one.